how did you get second place in your first ultra?
I signed up the morning of, and I had never been on these trails either. And I just remember the first hill, and I'm like, this is gonna be hard, but I love it. I remember the last aid station. I was like, can someone rub my calves? And they're like, we can, but you're in second. And I couldn't believe it.
Physical fitness is the easiest gateway to transformation because it immediately presents a challenge to all of our senses.
Tapping into sports and getting good at something or improving or learning strategy and all the different components of sport, it's the greatest gift you can give to a younger person.
Carrie, welcome to the UltraGrowth podcast. How are you going?
Thanks for having me. I'm very excited to meet you and talk with you.
Absolutely, absolutely. So, I've been planning on getting you on the show for a while, and we've talked about some really cool things on LinkedIn, in particular, these unique stair challenges
Oh,
that you were
yeah.
doing, and we're gonna have to unpack that. But we're gonna dive straight into it. What defined or were there any defining moments that sparked your passion for ultra endurance sports and coaching?
Oh my gosh. It was distinct. I was I got to back up a little bit to get us there though. I was a Division 1 tennis player and, you know, 8 through 18 my life was tennis, tennis courts, conditioning. I had a place to go to and I loved physical fitness. So that ended and I had all this time. I went to Europe. I fell in love with running. I was like, I love this. I love the sports conditioning way more than I ever loved the game. And I just kept running. And then I fell into it by accident. Then I moved to San Francisco, California after growing up in Indiana, going to Europe, San Francisco, and then I got in touch with a running club and they took me to trails and I fell in love with the trails. I'm running along the cliffs of the Pacific Ocean. I'm running up to, you know, 2,000, 4,000, sometimes 6,000, sometimes 9,000 feet in the Sierras, but I'll stick with Marin County. I just fell in love with being in nature, physical fitness, feeling so alive. And 1 mile turned into two, and two turned into 14. And before you knew it, I'm running with a trail map so I can link my routes together. And from sunset to from sun up to sundown on the days I didn't have to work. And I just wanted to do that all day long. And I wanted to show as many people the trails as I could.
It's interesting because I'm from the San Francisco Bay Area, but I wasn't running back then. Like my interest in ultra really kicked off here in Australia, but going back home to California, the Bay Area, I realized that in many ways it's kind of the epicenter of American ultra running. Like, what was the community like? Because I've actually never had the benefit of being part of that Northern Californian, trail community. What can you give us some flavor on the community?
I can. Oh my gosh. I was so green when I joined the community. I was 23 and the first ultra I ever did, I came in second and it was in Marin County. And all the people that seemed so old, they were probably only 30 or 40, like so young. Would come up to me and they were like, "Who are you running for? Wow, where'd you run in college?" And I was just like, I just love running so much. I don't know. And then I was kind of in awe that the older people would want me in their club because I think of myself as a tennis player and now I'm a runner. So it took some time for me to join the club, but once I did, it was the greatest chapter. I ran with the Tamapa runners and it's all ages and it's the most supportive environment because as you know, ultras could take 5 hours or they could take 20 hours. I hope you have a good day. It's just such a supportive community. And I really feel like we were all in awe of each other, learning from each other, supporting each other. You know, running clubs are pretty much therapy sessions. So we would get to know everyone kind of well. You know, of course, we all went through our injuries because runners talk about what's not right first before we talk about what is right. but it was such a supportive community, and I mean, encouraging me to go longer. Uh, After I did a couple 50Ks, they're like, "You should try 50 milers," and I was like, "Really? You think?" And they're like, "Yes," and I loved it. And they're like, "You should do 100Ks," and I was like, "Yeah, I think I want to bite that up." And then there I am doing Western states eventually, and training with groups for different races is just like it's just one of the best experiences.
How did you get second place in your first ultra?
Oh my gosh, I loved running. I moved to San Francisco in July of 1998, and the Headlands 50K was late August, and someone said, "You should do it." So I paid my $35 then for a 50K or something, low cost. I signed up the morning of, and I had never been on these trails either, and I just remember the first hill, and I'm like, "This is gonna be hard, but I love it." And I just kept going, and, I remember the last aid station, I was like, "Can someone rub my calves?" And they're like, "We can, but you're in second," and I couldn't believe it. So I let them rub my calves for, like, 30 seconds each, and I went up the last hill of Coastal um down to the other side to the finish at the beach, and I came in second.
Were you running much trail then, and what was your nutrition game like? Or are you just was it are you a natural runner? Like, were you actually prepared for something like that?
Okay, so great question. I had to think back about it. It's like, how was I just so fit to run 5 hours? And like I said, I had that tennis mind, tennis discipline. I loved physical fitness so much. So I was already running, I was biking a lot. I did a few bike races, endurance events before I even got into the trails. I had done about 6 marathons before. I started running marathons at 18, but the roads always left me with such knee pain. So I was like, I'll try the trails. And then I was just so green. It was pure joy. It was pure soul satisfaction. It was pure, like, I wonder if I can get up and over that hill. I loved being tired and still having gas in the tank. I loved my inner dialogue of like, you can't quit. You have to keep going if you want to quit. But like, I just love the whole combination of the internal struggle that was overall, I was just dominating it.
How was that internal struggle different or the same to tennis? And I'll give you context. Like, I've always been fascinated with tennis, and I actually didn't know you played at such an elite level of tennis. So I'm glad you brought that up because I've often wondered with tennis, like, how much of the game is actually about the opponent or you versus you, and how do you deal with that inner narrator, particularly when you've got everyone looking at you? Because it's a weird sport, right? Like, can you give some insight into how that inner dialogue was different to running or the same? Just unpack that for us.
Okay, the inner dialogue. I speak to this a lot. I train young athletes. I want to get into people's head because that is so pivotal. When I played tennis 8 through 18, so I was just gunning for a college scholarship. I really just wanted to play. I didn't know strategy like maybe I do now. I didn't know the game as well as I do now. So, I had raw talent, I had coaches, I had a family that played tennis. So, I really think just the love of tennis, and that's what I'm good at, that propelled me forward. I didn't I didn't hone the inner dialogue until I started running. The inner dialogue crushed my tennis game. I mean, it's like my serve couldn't get better or, she's a senior, I'm a freshman. It's I really honed my inner coach through running. And at the same time, I was also teaching spin classes. So I was everyone else's inner coach, telling them to go up that last hill and to pedal faster and let's go legs. So somewhere between my early career of running and teaching fitness classes, which I've always done, I learned the importance of the inner dialogue and be the inner coach. Don't let the inner critic win. So to get back to your question about tennis, tennis is such you're on such an island. Everyone's watching you. It's you against you. It's wearing the other opponent down. It's keeping your head in the game and encouraging you. I really got good at that with running. And I wasn't out there to win. I thought if I win, great, and I won 1 out of 40. But I loved getting through and unlocking new levels and new potential in myself and discovering, wow, I'm tougher than I thought. And really every training run taught me something. And as is the things that stands out most in my running career was that inner dialogue, the inner coach. And if that wasn't fun for me to do, I wouldn't have been a runner. I wouldn't have been an endurance runner.
Looking back, if you could take the magic and the secret sauce of what you learned in terms of mindset and inner dialogue to your younger self while you were playing tennis, what would those lessons look like? Or what would that insight or advice look like?
First of all, you have to believe you can. You have to believe. And then maybe if I backed it up a step, what's your why? Well, I want to do well. I want to win. I want to be better. I want to improve. And then the second one is you have to believe you can. I mean, with the ultras, I had this all knowing, like, of course I'm going to run 8 hours on Saturday and 10 hours on Sunday. Of course I am. And like, love hate with it. Yeah, just kind of crafting it. Message would I give to my younger self? Patience, perseverance, and that endurance is a skill. Even endurance of crafting a mindset is a skill. Endurance is a life skill. And so, I've created a little toolbox for endurance because there's many times I've had to reset the course and then knowing that that's part of who I am as an endurance runner, well, I translate that to life. And so giving myself the little toolbox of, well, what are the skills to keep enduring? The mind's got to be right. The heart's got to be in it. The why's got to be big. The positive self-talk's got to be running daily.
Have you ever read Andre Agassi's book?
Yes, open.
Yeah. Isn't that such a wild story of a struggle with your inner narrative, right? Like it is such a remarkable tale of like this love hate. It was written really well, I think. But I think like the extremes of like his dad and that tennis ball machine that was like a monster, and like he kind of didn't really like tennis, it seemed like, but it was just this bizarre relationship. And it was really insightful to kind of in terms of highlighting his inner struggle, right?
Yeah. And for me, that was the first book that kind of talked about this inner struggle. But that book, I feel like came out in like around 2010. So I was already, I forget the year it came out. I'm close, maybe. But that, just hearing someone that I looked up to talk about, oh, this inner dialogue is not just me, this is everyone. And also, as I was in the running group, people would talk about it. I just don't believe in myself, or I don't think I can. And then I spent 20 years as a personal trainer. And I truly believe I was training the inner dialogue to believe they can and to want to be healthy and to take great ownership of their health. So Andre Agassi really put it on paper for me that 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 is something I will endure in anything. And I think that's a skill like I really want to help and support people through is taming the inner critic to become the inner coach.
Now, I know that you're working with kids, right? And young athletes. Like, is that harder or easier to do than adults?
That's a great question. I have always worked with adults before, but as I've gone through my own kind of reset and reinvention and figuring out my inner dialogue that I I want to be what I needed as a young adult. I had divorced parents. I felt like I was always confused, so I just put myself into sports and and then that gave me the path. But with, kids coming out of COVID and uh, screens in their face all the time and just comparison and the monkey brain going wild in kids, I really want to be a voice and a light to just give them tools for positive impact, self encouragement, positive affirmation, like really to improve self confidence and to teach them to anticipate these things, that this will be something you deal with all light at different parts of your life, all all through life.
Question, something I've been thinking about lately.
Okay.
Do you think that insecurity is required for striving?
Yeah. I think we need contrast. I've been thinking about this a lot lately, and it's very interesting because I have had yeah, I fell off my track professionally a little bit and it made me very insecure. I was like, wait, no, I'm an ultra runner, but I'm not because I stopped racing years ago. So wait, who am I? What am I? How do I show up? And I almost felt like I was stuck, and that was really causing the inner dialogue to get loud, and it made me insecure in a lot of ways. So I had to kind of reset I had to pause and kind of reset and get aligned. And what I realized, it's like I wasn't quite stuck. I just wasn't thinking big enough. I had kind of run out the course of being the endurance athlete or the sport, and and thinking bigger kind of caused me to face some insecurities. And here I am stepping into my first podcast, which I'm so excited. I feel like it's a year or two overdue. And I am so, ultra running is get uncomfortable with the uncomfortable. Get comfortable with being uncomfortable. And this feels like all the feels of an ultra. It's like I want to step out and make an big impact. I have all these years of expertise and tools and strategies and mindset hacks that I really want to pass on to others kind of at crossroads.
I heard Rich Roll talk about it a long time ago, and this was kind of at the beginning of when I was running ultras, right? Like I can keep running and running long distances because it's kind of how I get lost, right? And you know how much energy it takes to train and do it properly, right? And the thing is I'm at a place now where I have to look at the gains, and when I mean gains, I mean the insights that I think I will derive from running longer distances versus the cost. And there's a diminishing return now. And what I mean by that is the ultra running for me had to evolve into something else. And it's very easy to go back into just ultras because in many ways that's like an addiction. Like when I'm a recovering addict, right? Like it's very easy to just start drinking again. And obviously ultras are healthier, but for me, I believe that I've kind of tapped whether I'm running, I want to run 300 Ks a solo next October, and I'm reflecting on it because I have another thing that's on my plate, and this other thing is probably more aligned with my purpose. And but I'm not a quitter. And I've already kind of committed internally to running these 300 Ks, but I got to look at, okay, it's okay to probably quit a lower level goal in service of something that's more aligned with my purpose. And I think that's the tricky part, right? Because and you're right. I think like the not anchoring ourselves to this kind of identity, then how do we pivot that forward and connect the dots? That's the secret sauce, right? A lot of people aren't able to do this. Like I had a conversation with Michael Gervais out of the US. He's a top sports psychologist, and we were talking about the ability of some athletes to transition versus others. And and what it appears to be is that some athletes anchor themselves to the sport versus some athletes anchor themselves to behaviors
Oh, I love this.
and attitudes,
I love this.
right? One is transitional, one you can't.
Yeah.
Yeah, right, and, so I think it's fascinating. The reason I did ask you about the striving and insecurities piece, because I've got a son, he's 7, and I really focus on crafting his narrative by exposure to, like, just the right amount of hard, and then I try to bring him back before taking him over the edge, right? Because there's this tricky balance I've read about. I'm not an expert, so I don't know, particularly when kids are in just getting into sport. Like my son's just getting into cricket, and it seems like that's his sport. And this balance of like, how much do I push him versus let him have fun? And I don't know. And what's your feedback on that? Like, how do you ensure you don't burn them out or you don't diminish that interest too early? And what's that point when you actually start to try to optimize them?
Oh my gosh, you said so much. I was taking notes. Okay. For one, you said you felt well, you're talking about your son in cricket. There Benjamin Hardy writes this book, Future Self, and you have to call on this new identity and step into that new identity. And he's like your point A and point B, and B's gotta be like ostentatious. It's gotta be so unbelievable. And the the point he makes or the story he tells in a book is about his kid playing tennis. Is he on the trajectory to be a college tennis player or is he on the trajectory to be a pro tennis player? Because the paths are wildly different. But I will say the people on track to be college players sometimes get burned out way before. And then of course, I was just with a swimmer yesterday that's like I got to the Olympic trials and I've not swum again. And he's 63 and he's like I was 16. Okay, but to your question, it's I mean, I can't help but to think about how I got here because I love tennis, I love the physical fitness, and that and I love the mental game, but it wasn't the tennis game. I love the mental game of me improving and me getting better and me like, what else am I good at? Or what else can I learn? Or where are my edges? For a kid today, I don't have kids, so I can only use myself as of a reference. I see my niece and nephews dabbling in sports and doesn't I don't know if they'll be as important as they were for me. But to answer something you said, it's like you're starting to feel the diminishing effects of just this low distance because you want something bigger. And Jesse Itzler speaks to this too about big nuggets per year, and plan one or two and then four smaller ones and smaller ones. So as an ultra runner to ultra runner, we know it's not about the destination. It is so about the journey and the process and the moments you hate it, but then the revelations and um yeah, so uh, speaking about your kid and cricket, opportunity, show your son like he can be good at something. And these are the building blocks of discipline and consistency and repetition and showing up for yourself and showing up for your teammates. There's there's so much to it. I don't,
It's a
we
tricky
both,
one,
yeah, we both know there's not one answer. If you pick the right sport, wow,
and it's tricky. I think Angela Duckworth in her work on grit, it has a fair bit of like analysis around the points in the development of a young person where you should start to optimize them for performance. But she's also quite clear if you do it too early, you risk disinterest, right? And so I think it's like, how do you fuel the fire without burning them out? I mean, there are anomalies, right? Like Andre Agassi, Tiger Woods, right? Like his dad's training was pretty hectic. Like he would, I don't know if you know his story, like when Tiger was training, like his dad would drop golf bags or like start clapping or like because his dad was a Green Beret. right? You can imagine what that was like, right? And he started optimizing them really young, the Williams sisters. Like they were almost like developed to play tennis. But I think like you right? But like what's that look like for most kids? And maybe you just have to be if you're gonna go down that path, you have to be so overbearing, you just give the child no other option because what seems to be the common denominator there is an overbearing father in all those scenarios.
Yeah, I did not have an overbearing father. I had a family that loved tennis and very active. We're all still fit, and it's just our way of life. I will say, as I'm sitting here thinking about what you're saying, at 14 and 15, I did an outward bound, and it was just kind of out of the blue. It was called Summerfield Studies, and I went to the mountains. And being a girl from Indiana, I mean, we traveled, but to go to the wilderness and be in awe of something bigger than me and to learn new skills in the outdoors and to just I mean, I expanded, my heart opened. I am was like immediately connected to altitude, to the sky, to the wind, to the trees. And there's something in that that just feeling alive. I think that's what I stay connected to, like the feeling alive. So if the ultras just aren't kind of like you've done that, it's like, yeah, move on to the next thing that what makes you feel alive. And for me, the next thing is like I want to get on stage. It terrifies me to talk about this, but I really want to be I want to help uplift and encourage and empower and help people transform to feel alive. And I believe fitness is the foundation of personal growth.
Why do you believe that?
You feel alive, you tap into your vitality, your muscles burn, your body changes, you lose weight, you gain weight, your breathing changes. It can be uncomfortable. You still have to push through it. Then you incorporate the mind, then you incorporate the soul. It's just having a physical fitness discipline, I really believe is a foundational piece of personal growth and transformation.
I
Even
agree
with
with you.
you, I remember your push-up challenge.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think physical fitness is the easiest gateway to transformation because it kind of immediately presents a challenge to all of our senses.
So offering that to your son, the pathway, it's like giving him the taste of cricket and the team and I mean, who knows where he will go, but just tapping into sports and getting good at something or improving or learning strategy and all the different components of sport. I think that is it's really it's the greatest gift you can give to a younger person.
Yeah, it's ironic because I spent my whole time in Australia making fun of cricket, and it's a long game, right? And so I'm the coach, and I don't even know the rules really. I've got good dads around me, and the parents kind of like me because I'm like the 1980s coach. I don't take shit, right? Like, oh no, like I'm there's no participation awards with me, right? So like, and I'm looking at the parents. I'm like, am I intense? But I'm not yelling at the kids, but the kids are honed in, right? Like I don't like them off of the fairies. Cricket's a game of waiting. When you can imagine a bunch of 7-year-old boys, right? You're either waiting the bat or you're on the field. It's a hard ball. Half of them are looking the other direction. You get cracked in the head with the ball. So there's a whole like focus piece and now I got the kids like telling each other on the field, focus up, hone in, switch on. It's great. It's like,
Which is another skill we're not taught. We tell kids to go focus. I was told to focus, but how do you focus? How do you do that? So teaching to that number one skill in cricket, I mean, they're all going to be so good at that. And then once you get their attention and they're good at that, then you can layer on the other pieces of the game.
yeah, no, I think actually for many reasons, I'm probably the right coach while they're very young, and even though, like, they'll get older, someone will have to give them skills, but I think in terms of just having the basics of, like, an effective practice, being on time, like, not being disruptive, and I think those things are great, but to your point around team sports, like, I mean, I've had my son mainly involved in individual stuff because we run, we ride, But it was really interesting in one of the games, one of the older boys that goes to school with him came and gave him like a high five, and I could see his chest pump up, and he had this moment of like connection. I was like, wow, that's priceless, right? Like, because I saw that moment where he kind of leveled up in his own mind, right?
Yeah. I mean, there's so many things that happen in that moment that we couldn't quite put to words, but he feels it, right? And that feeling is that feeling is forever.
What's life look like for Carrie in the next year or two? Like, what do you want to obviously do more of this? You're a super accomplished athlete. You like working with kids. Like, have you started to connect the dots on all this stuff? Like, if I'm talking to you in a year or 2 years, what's your future self look like?
Okay, because we are talking about ultra growth. And we we talked about Benjamin Hardy's book for Future Self. I and I told you I was stuck, but I just wasn't thinking big enough. It's been about 4 years of kind of the last 4 years, kind of COVID changed my business, and I started inner dialogue was not working so much for me as I was like, I don't know how to do technology. I'm not good at these things. And then I started telling myself those things. Whereas I had to really readjust my focus going forward of like, no, I'm setting up my next ultra and my next ultra is going to be full of things I don't know how to do. Just like that first 50K, just like that first 50 miler, just like the 100 miler. Just like so many things we all do in life. We my dad has this great saying. He called my Western States my 100 miler. He called it the Tahoe to Auburn. And that is you're at point A and you know you want to get to point B, but you cannot see it. You don't know what's going to happen. You know it's going to be painful, ugly, messy, surprising. And so I use that analogy a lot. What's my next Tahoe to Auburn? My next Tahoe to Auburn. It's the point A and the point B, but I can't quite see the point B, but I'm going to have to learn on the fly. I'm going to have to pivot as I go. I'm going to have to keep picking myself up and narrowing in on that point B.
As you connect the dots and as you start to you're doing different things, like, how do you know how does Carrie know or start to determine what the right paths are or the right activities towards Auburn?
Oh, it's kind of like what you mentioned earlier. It's just it's got to feel meaningful and purpose. And for 20 years running ultras, my soul was on fire. I loved it. Like I loved every bit of it. So I have had that feeling and I've been called crazy because people are like, how can you love something so much? But that's what it was for me. Um, so I've been there's this all knowing that it's got to feel similar to that. I mean, I wasn't making much money running and I did it for 20 years and the wear and tear on my body, although I feel great, my knees are great, like, I'm, like, more alive than I've ever been.
I think you're onto something, and I think, like, I've got friends and even myself that have found ways to leverage ultra and the ultra mindset into categories that really interest them, right? Like I've got a friend here who, he runs a consulting business. He was a top consultant at a McKinsey, but he also runs, longer distances like your 300K, multi-day events. And he takes that and incorporates that into his consulting or a community a leader here that lives in my little town, and she started a running community for moms, right? And it's like a really tight knit community, and she sells products and does pretty well. So I think you're on to something. I think the key there is just to see where that real alignment is of what you're doing and your soul being on fire. And it's a tricky thing.
I do love working with executives, but not being in the business, I'm fighting my own imposter syndrome a little bit, so I really love working in the athletic realm, and because I was a college athlete, I love speaking to them. When I was a college athlete, we had Jim Lore, who's a a sports psychologist come speak to us. And it was so incredible, like being a college athlete and everything, all the training, the psychology, everything that comes to you as a college athlete. It was so pivotal. And some kids make it to college athletes, some don't, but I would love to be that voice to get into their heads and really leave like a mental legacy, really impact positively in that into the mental and maybe even emotional space.
Running so many ultras, did you ever have a did not finish?
I did not have a did not finish. I tried to have a did not finish, but I remember what my second to the last 50K, I I ran 40, and it's not that I ended on that number. It just was like, well, I want to do these 2 August races and then I'll be done. And the second to the last one, I do believe I came in fifth, but I was running second and I was at the last aid station. I'm like, I don't want this bad enough today. And I mean, I was really like, yeah, I'll take off my band, whatever. And they were like, no, you don't come this far and you don't quit and 20 years in. So, but I did have a did not start in my last year of running. And I think that played with me a little bit, where I missed my alarm and didn't even start the race. That had never happened before.
Yeah, I think the key there is you missed your alarm. I've always I've always wondered, I've always asked lots of athletes the lessons from their races, but actually never talked about the DNFs, right? And like how, like even for me, like I'll run through cramps, like full body cramps, as to get through that finish line because I'm scared that it's a slippery slope. But it's interesting to get those insights is to like people's reflections, right? Because I don't think it has to be all bad, right? It doesn't have to be something where particularly for someone that is running ultras, it's not an easy thing, is it?
No, I mean, there's preparation, the gearing up, I mean, your whole life is revolving around this calendar date, and there's so much more that goes into the days before that calendar date. And maybe you're injured and can't toe the line or, the race itself is not as rewarding as the process to get there. And I'm gonna use my Western States. I've only run Western States once, and it's a 100-mile race, and it's in June. That's the Tahoe to Auburn. It is the Super Bowl of ultra running. It's the Super Bowl in the United States, at least. So I was signed up to do it in 2007, no, 2008, and 3 days before the race, fires canceled it. And I just like, it's my day. I got in through the lottery. I meant to do this, but I was so injured and so scared. What if I can't finish? But then 3 days before, the fire shut it down. So I was like really disappointed. I knew I was going to do really well all of a sudden. But I had a whole year to decide, do I want to put myself through that year of training again to run 100 miles? This was the one race where I think I could, but it wasn't an all knowing. It was, I'm going to do whatever it takes. I will crawl to the finish line if I need to. And that's kind of how my race went. But I'm bringing this up because um, Western states, there's a 30-mile cutoff. And at hour 26, I had about 15 miles to go. And my pacers were like, just walk it if you have to. You got time. You missed the 24-hour cutoff. You have no problem with the 30-hour cutoff. And permission to just get it done was something new for me. And I will say permission, I'm not going to quit, but it's just permission to get it done. Just do it, get it done. And anyone that does 100 miles and takes over, 24 hours, they know you start at sunup. And then there's always that second sunrise. And that second sunrise can be defeating because you've been out there 24 hours, or it can be exhilarating because it's a new day and you don't have much longer to go. And I just really found that second sunrise so exhilarating. And maybe I had a harder race because it took me 29 hours in the end. instead of 16 hours, which will win that race. But it's one of my proudest moments that I didn't DNF, and it was almost that second sunrise really woke me back up because your whole body's like quit, shut down, muscles are screaming. It's all spirit and all mental then.
Oh, that was beautiful. I think there's so much in that. I think it's our ability to reframe events, manage expectations in the moment, and be skillful with that, and shift is required, and understanding that it's not about black and white thinking. There's a whole level of gray. And I think that's those things that we learn in ultra are the things that are applicable into life. And that's the secret sauce that you're going to distill through your coaching and teaching.
Thank you, RJ.
Absolutely. I look, I'm so grateful for your time. We're going to land the plane there, Carrie. If our audience want to connect with you, where is the best place to do so?
You can always reach out at LinkedIn. I'm in the process of just kind of revamping everything. But LinkedIn, Carrie Sisk, Sisk. I am forever Go Cisco. I am Go Cisco at Instagram. My last name is Sisk. Everyone chanted Go Cisco. So there's a message in that too. But Go Cisco Go at Instagram. Those are the two good places right now.
Thank you so much, Carrie. We'll put that in the show notes.
All right. Thanks so much for having me.
Of course.
Thank you for tuning into the UltraGrowth podcast. We hope you've gained valuable insights and inspiration from today's episode on executive development and personal growth. Remember, the journey to becoming a better leader is continuous. Apply what you learned, stay curious, and keep pushing the boundaries of your potential. Join us next time as we continue to explore the strategies and stories that empower leaders like you to thrive in the ever-evolving world of business. Until then, keep learning, keep growing, and keep leading with purpose. Take care and see you next time.